Today I'm going to make some bread. I love making bread. There's something very primal into making bread and in sharing bread. I think they say that there are certain things that we culturally have imbued in our DNA, and probably bread might be one of those. It's a really important symbol. I don't have to remind you about the religious symbolism of it, but also it's just there's something really beautiful in sharing bread with other people. I once was at a meditation circle, and the theme was harvest, and somebody just brought some bread and we shared it between us, and there was something really I want to say connecting in that experience, and also there's something really lovely in having the house smelling of fresh bread. My granddad was a pâtissier, but his neighbour was a baker, and the smell of fresh bread, for me, it's just one of those really strong smells from my childhood, and it means also home. And I think that the connection between bread and home is really, really strong. Now, I'm going to make some very, very, very easy spelt bread. If you are into, complex baking and kneading and all that, no, this is not going to be for you. I use spelt because I'm wheat intolerant, and I'm going to tell you a few things about wheat as well. And what I normally do, I prepare the dough in the evening. It takes literally 5 minutes to prepare the dough, and then I let it rise throughout the night. And then when I get up in the morning, about 7 o'clock, put the oven on, put the bread in, 35-40 minutes later, have a shower prepared, and then you have fresh bread. I sometimes live in, for my work, I will live with other people, and I often do the bread because I just leave it out in the morning, and it's just really lovely. They tell me it's a very, very, very nice and tasty bread. So, but you have to take their word for it, or you have to try it yourself. What you're going to need is a kilo of spelt flour. You can use wholemeal spelt. This is organic white. And then a sachet of yeast. This is about 7 grams, and it's advisable for a 650 grams of flour batch. But I'll tell you why I don't use any more than this. Then we're going to need about 700 ml of lukewarm water. What I do, I mix boiling water and cold water to get a kind of like really lukewarm temperature. And yeah, if you put your finger in and it doesn't burn, it's okay. If it burns, it's probably too hot. And then we're going to need some olive oil, little twist, a bit of sugar and a bit of salt. Sugar for raising the salt, for the saltiness of bread. So, now I went and had a baking lesson with the guy who invented ciabatta. You know what ciabatta, the Italian bread, the flat Italian bread that is used for panini. Now his name is Arnaldo Cavallari, and apparently he developed ciabatta as a kind of bread in the early 80s. Now, it is possible. Italy, from a gastronomic point of view, Italy it's very varied. There isn't such a thing as Italian cuisine, more or less. There is actually regional cuisine that is kind of like unified into Italian. And effectively what is more known as Italian cuisine in the world is that of immigrants who then spread it somewhere else. So bread is an interesting point in case. A friend of mine is an anthropologist, and she actually focuses on food. And you know, as I said before, bread is amazing. It's an amazing indicator of cultural traditions. We know in all sorts of different traditions. But basically in Italy you just have very different kind of breads according to the area. They have traditional shapes, like in Milano you have Rosetta, which is actually looks like a little flower. In Puglia in the south you have kind of like big bread, with, I think they're made with durum wheat. And in Tuscany, for example, they don't use salt in the bread. The bread in Tuscany has no salt, to the point that there is a quote from Dante, the Italian poet from the 13th century, who spent most of his life in exile for political reasons. He had been thrown out of Florence. And there is this very famous quote and said, how salty is somebody else's bread, is the bread that you eat outside of your country, homeland. So anyway, so we don't have a unified sort of bread as is identifiable, for example, with the French baguette. And this was one of the reasons that Ronaldo was interested. So he traveled a lot because he was a rally driver. He won the European Championships a few times. And he also had a degree in economy, and his family owned a mill. And he realized that through traveling that you could find baguettes everywhere in the world, and that there had been a kind of like effort to establish baguette as a symbol of French culture. So he came up with this idea that we can do the same with Italian bread, but we don't have a unified one. And so he came up with this bread, and he did a few studies. And one of the characteristics of ciabatta in itself is that it has a very high ratio of water compared to flour. So that's why we use 1 kilo of flour and 700 ml of water. The other thing that he discovered is that it's nicer if you have a long raise. And one of the advantages of a long raise is that the gluten in the wheat is eaten up by the enzymatic process. Now, he argues, this is Arnaldo's opinion, that industrialized baking, industrial bread making, because it relies on making it quick, uses a lot of yeast and doesn't actually allow the process to eat up the gluten, which is not very ideal for the human organism. And so you have commercial bread tends to be very high in gluten. It has something like 12%. While his bread, because it's raised in so long, and I guess if you do sourdough bread and you raise it for long, it's probably the same thing, which is why people might feel that sourdough bread is healthier. The enzymatic process reduces the gluten content to the point that his bread had less than 1%. So this is already a very good reason to raise it for long. So you would use a tiny amount of yeast. He actually used for a 10 kilos batch of flour, which with the water would become a 17 kilos batch, he would use about 25 grams, and then just let it rise up to 30 hours. No less than 12, up to 30. One of the other things that he discovered by doing this is that you need to have a strong wheat flour to be able to do that. Otherwise, if this is quite, we know that wheat is a very, very hard crop. It's very demanding crop. It just really eats up the mineral content in the field, in the herd. And so what happens is that in Europe, the cultivation of wheat has become much more intensive. And so the wheat that is produced is actually not as strong. So he was trying to do this long raise, and I think it's the molecular setup of the dough and of the wheat just collapsed. So he started working with wheat that is grown in areas which have much more land and where the crop is cultivated in a less intensive way. So you would use North American, Australian, Kazaki bread, and you know, I know that here in the UK you can go and buy strong Canadian flour, and I think that's exactly the point. So if you want to do it with wheat, you can do it like that. So in a way, this is also a healthier bread. I mean, I think that when you do your own food, it's always healthier than anything that you have purchased. But anyway, so we're going to use 1 kilo of flour. In here we're going to put the sachet yeast. This is just normal dry yeast. As I said, this is actually 7 grams. You can use a bit less if you wanted. Then I'm going to put a spoonful of sugar, because you know that with a spoonful of sugar, everything is better. And salt. Saltiness, it's, you know, it's very subjective. I like bread to be a bit salty. So, then a good dash of olive oil. This is, we make olive oil based bread in Italy, and we make olive oil based breadstick as well. And it just adds a bit to the texture. It's just really, I find it lovely. So I basically always add a bit of olive oil, and then just add the water a bit by bit. This should be enough. I mean, what we want to achieve is a quite soft dough. I'm going to add, and then I just, as you can see, I just use a fork, which is absolutely enough. This. When I say it's lazy, I mean not I'm joking, as you can see. But I believe that laziness brings a side effect of functionality. I just hate wasting effort. And I'm sure that, you know, there's plenty of cooking that requires some effort. I just don't think it's a kind of Herculean, testosterone-driven enterprise, but, you know, whatever makes people happy. I'm going to add the rest of the water. I mean, it doesn't take much, as I said, but you want to make sure that the dough is well mixed. I don't think I mentioned it. It's good practice to put the salt on the outside so that it doesn't interfere. Of course, then we mix it, but if you have a core of yeast and sugar and the salt is not all on it, it's going to make it easier for the dough to rise. There we go. So to finish it, I might knead it a bit, just to make sure that it's well mixed, but to be honest, it's not completely necessary. There we go. So I'm going to wash my hands and then make my hand dirty again. There's also, well, I believe that there's something really beautiful about using your hands for cooking. I'm not going to go to say, you know, to the point of saying it's a central activity. Of course, it's a central activity. Food is a central activity, and so cooking is a central activity. Now, you see, you cannot do proper kneading with this because it's actually quite soft. So it's just, what you really want is just to make sure that there are not pockets of just flour that are going to stay there. And that's all you need. It's more kind of like, if you look at the way a kneading machine works. You know, you just do this kind of exercise. But again, kneading, it's really good for you. I think it's a very good therapy, so please feel free. I actually tend to use it to use kneading more when I make fresh pasta than with bread, because again, I just, you know, bread, it's something I make very quickly, and I just prepare it for the day before, and it's sorry. Just because bread is something I make very quickly, and I just prepare it for the day after. So I just, you know, I don't want to spend more than 10-15 minutes in the evening preparing the dough. There we go. That's ready. Now, of course, what I'm going to do, I'm going to just cover this with a clean kitchen towel and let it to raise until tomorrow morning. So it's usually, you know, it's 7 to 7. I sometimes do it a bit later as 9 to, but still, even if it's 9 to 7, it still is 10 hours, which is more than the 2 hours that it's kind of, you normally are advised to use, which is the minimum. And sorry, I'm just going to this near the camera. You can see the quantity of it and how it is. It's just quite soft. And we cover it and just leave it here. I know people put it in the fridge overnight, but I understand that the fridge actually sort of like stop a bit the rising. So I leave it in a lukewarm environment. My granddad used to, as I said, was a baker, used to raise dough overnight, and he would keep it by his boiler in a wood container. But we are afraid we will use plastic. You know, it's not optimal. So that's done. We just have to wait until tomorrow morning. And here we are. As they say, it's the morning after. So here I have my beautiful dough, which has been grazed for a long time, so you can see how much it grazed. And it has a bit of acidity now, which is actually absolutely fine. The grazing process creates acidity. This is why it's sourdough. This is not a sourdough, but basically the process has been so long that we get a bit of acidity. So all I need to do now is to take this and put it in a baking tin. I actually use a tray, and just put it in the oven. I have started the oven. It's a pan oven, and again, ovens, very temperamental little things. So I have a fan oven which I haven't used for a long time, but because of the quality of it, I only put it up to 180. In a normal oven, I would probably put it up to 100, 220. In a gas oven, I really put it up quite high, 7, 8. But this one, still getting to become friends with it, and actually I've already burned a couple of things. Nonetheless, here we go. So what I do, I put a bit of oil on the bottom of the tray, of the tin here, just to make sure that the bread doesn't stick. And yeah, I use my hands. I actually like to have oily hands when I do this. With the bread, just take it on the sides. Again, no need for me. And you think, oh my god, it's just like, I mix it a bit perhaps, but and the dough is still going to be quite soft. So when it gets into the thing, it's going to go a bit flat. But literally, you throw it in. This is, it's a dough that is, I actually use this dough to make pizza as well. So So it's not your average bread dough. And as I said, when I was having the baking session with Arnaldo, his dough, it's almost glue. It really is sort of difficult to work it, and he actually puts flour around it because it is of industrial economy. But and he was doing like ciabattas. Now I have to specify this is not ciabatta. It's just that it's a similar procedure, but doesn't always do it. And also for the ciabatta, you really need a proper baking stone, and you need a baking cabinet. So here we go. This is just ready to be put into the oven. And I think I'm going to leave it there for about 35 minutes, then check if it's cooked. Otherwise, and here we are. This is the bread. As you can see, it's nicely brown. It's got a nice crust. I use a wooden spoon to help me take it out. It is hot, so just handle with care. There we go, and you can hear a nice noise. As I say, I have tried with a stick to make sure, that it comes out clean. Make sure that the inside is cooked. And then go. So you see, it's quite flat as a bread, not really from a ciabatta, for example. I don't know if you can hear the noise, the crust, it's just delicious. It's going to be flavors. To begin with, the inside is still going to be a bit moist, but it will dry out. And of course, when it's like this, well, delicious for breakfast with the pasta and the you get a nice, what do you call it, a nice toast top, is that what you call it? And let me show you just it. Inside of bread, it's quite nice. And there we go. This is cooked for about 40 minutes. As I said, it very much depends on the oven, so the only way is checking it. Oh, and this is for Brian, for my friend Brian, who I cooked this for many times. And actually, when we first met, it was pretty much while I was making bread. And then he started making his own. And I think there's something really nice about making your own bread, and I would warmly encourage it.
So many times I just pass by, took little notice of her smile.